The most dangerous prison ever built has no walls, no guards, no chains. And most people inside it don't even know they're there. Picture this, Paris 1789. The streets are burning. The air smells like smoke and fury. The people are done. When they stormed that Bastille that day, they weren't just breaking down a door. They were breaking down control itself. Back then, power was honest about what it was. Kings, armies, executions in public squares. You knew who held the chain. But today, the chain is still there. But it's harder to see. Every modern state is built on the same pillars. Police, military, courts, politics, money, and even media. All of it built by the people. All of it now operating above the people. Think about it for a second. The police officer is kind of a civilian. The soldier, again, a civilian. The politician, a civilian. But something happens when you step inside the machine. You stop being a person and you become a function, a gear. And gears don't question the engine. Now, I want to be clear about something. This isn't an argument that the system is evil, even though it might be. Some people thrive inside it, build wealth inside it, create real freedom inside it. So the question isn't whether the system exists. The question is, do you understand it well enough to use it before it uses you? So here's something that people don't talk about that often. The courts. We're told they represent fairness, balance and truth. But look at what's been quietly happening and shifting in recent years. They're looking about reducing the reliance on juries, moving towards decisions from judges, streamlining processes in the name of efficiency. It sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Faster, cleaner, and less complicated. But here's what gets removed along with the complications. You. A jury is 12 ordinary people, people like you, people who can look a prosecutor in the eye and say, no, remove that. And justice doesn't disappear overnight. It's just quietly becoming something that happens to people, not with them. And then we look at ownership. You work hard, you sacrifice, you save, you buy property, build investments, you have assets. They're yours, aren't they? And here's the uncomfortable truth. Ownership inside a structured system is conditional. Under the right circumstances, crime, sanctions, disputes, state interest, assets can be frozen, seized, redirected. Now, I'm not saying this happens to ordinary people every day, but I'm asking you to sit with this question. If something can be taken away from you without your consent, was it ever really yours? It's not just a scare tactic. It's a philosophical reality of living inside an organised system. You don't own things absolutely. You hold them by permission, and if you go against the state, they take them. In 1651, philosopher Thomas Hobbes described it very well, and he called it the Leviathan, a massive all-powerful entity formed by the collective body of people built to create order from chaos. We gave up a piece of our freedom in exchange for protection. It's a fair trade maybe, but here's what Hobbes didn't fully explore. What happens when the Leviathan grows beyond its purpose? When it stops maintaining order and starts defying it, shaping not just what you can do, but what you think you want, what you believe is normal, what you never think to question. That's not a monster with teeth, that's something far more effective. And then let's look at the invisible engine, the system underneath every other system, money. Governments and central banks control interest rates, inflation, and the total money supply in circulation. Through fractional reserve banking, money doesn't just exist. It's created, multiplied through lending. A bank takes your deposit, lends most of it out, and that becomes someone else's deposit. And the cycle continues. So money isn't just currency, it's a mechanism. And we are born into a world where we spend our lives working to obtain something that was designed and issued by someone else. Not evil, but maybe it is. Maybe it's a way of controlling. And then there's taxation. You earn £1 or $1, income tax reduces that. You spend what's left on other taxes, VAT, fuel duty tax. You invest the rest, and then you're taxed on the gains. And then for every little bit you've got left, and you want to pass on, then it's inheritance tax. Layer after layer after layer. By the time money has moved through a life, how much of it was ever really kept? So when people ask why, despite working harder than any generation in history, so many people are financially stuck, it's not effort, it's not mindset, it's friction built into the structure. Because if you take off a little bit off the top every time, the chance of growing is a lot less. You can do your own calculations with compounding growth. If you take even a very small amount off the top every time, it accumulates a lot more slowly. And then there's behaviour shaping. And this is where it gets potentially more subtle. Control doesn't always look like a threat. Sometimes it looks like a reward. Cast your mind back to not long ago, when certain campaigns were put forward to coerce people into the jab. Free food was offered, chips and burgers. Was that manipulative? And what doesn't matter is which side you're on. What matters is the principle. Behaviour can be directed, nudged, shaped and guided without a single order being given. No command, no threat, no force. Just the right incentive at the right moment. Skinner figured this out with pigeons in 1948, the famous psychologist. The playbook hasn't changed, only the scale has. And then there's the media, who rarely tell you what to believe. That would be too obvious. What they do instead is far more effective. It decides what you pay attention to and gives you an angle to accept. It doesn't force you to believe something, but it makes you. It decides what feels urgent, what feels threatening, what feels normal. And like a story, it can give you ideas of what may happen later. Foreshadowing, as it's called. It sets the frame, and once you're inside the frame, you argue about the picture. Not who built the frame, not who hung it on the wall, not whose house you're standing in. And when the same narrative repeated enough across channels, across voices and platforms, it stops feeling like a perspective. It starts feeling like a reality. Not because anyone forced you, but because repetition at scale is its own kind of authority. And what about the human story, the loop? Let's say there's a man called Daniel. Smart, disciplined, driven. He did everything the system told him to do. Worked 60-hour weeks, got promoted, paid his taxes, invested. Every year he earned more, and every year it felt exactly the same. Higher income, higher tax bracket, higher costs, less time, less energy, less peace. One evening he sat in his car in the driveway, too tired to go inside. And then he asked himself, why does it feel like I'm running at full speed and going nowhere? It wasn't weakness or failure, but that's sometimes what running inside a structure like this feels like. The treadmill doesn't tell you it's a treadmill. And then every control system in history has had one vulnerability. People. People who could hesitate, question, refuse to do things. But we are entering a moment where systems are becoming automated. AI, algorithms, robotics, no emotion, no moral doubt. No one who can look you in the eye and decide not to follow the instruction because it feels wrong. And this isn't science fiction. This is the direction of travel. And as automation displaces work at scale, and can be the armies, the police, that won't question authority. And with universal basic income likely to come in, what happens? What happens when your income is conditional? When access to the system depends on behaviour the system approves of? And look, it's not a conspiracy. This is how leverage works. So step back and look at what we've walked through. A system that centralises power. Those at the top have all of the control. The media, the army, the police, the monetary system. They shape your behaviour without force. They control the frame you think inside. And it's also becoming increasingly automated. Is that good for you or good for the elite? Is this just evolution though? Or are these tools of oppression? And is it inevitable that structures get more complex? Or is it inevitable that they collapse? And here's the question that cuts through all of it. Are you aware of this system? Because you cannot navigate what you cannot see. And this isn't a call to panic per se. It isn't a call necessarily to take everything down. It's a call to wake up. And realistically, there are people who thrive in this system. There are people who do very, very well. And they probably have in fact, all of these things. They understand money, how it's created, taxed and moved, not just how to earn it. They understand to build value, and how it doesn't just depend necessarily on one skill or one source. It's reputation, networks, skills. And they know how to think critically. The system wants your emotion. Your outrage is easier to manage than your analysis. Because we might not be able to redesign the cage, but we can stop mistaking it for open air. We can see it, we can understand it, and move through it differently. We're not submitting. We understand our power within the system, and maybe at some point there will be a revolution and things will change. But for now, we need to understand how the system controls us. And if this made you feel uncomfortable, perfect. Uncomfortable and thinking is exactly where change starts. If it made you think differently about the world you're moving through every day, then tell someone. Share it with someone who needs to hear it themselves to wake them up and light a rocket up their arse, basically, to do more, understand how things are, and be a face for change. Because sometimes we just need to stop fearing it and start using it.